Rarangatira, karangatipo, e te iwi, tēnā koutou. Kia koe Teanau, he mihi mahana, he mihi nunui, kia koe, nau mai, hara mai, e hoa ki Rarangatira. Te whānau pukamata, nau mai, hoki mai, ki tō tātou whakawhitiwhiti kōrero, te kai a te rangatira. Ko Tānia Pauwharea hau no ngai tūhoi. Welcome everyone to the third live streamed Rarangatira kōrero. We're streaming this on 2 Facebook pages, He Waka Eke Noa and the Southern and Western Initiative, which I hope is running all smoothly. My name is Tānia Pauwharea and I'm a social entrepreneur working across all 3 of those projects. And for those of you who don't know who the Southern and Western Initiatives are, we are the social and community innovation team in Auckland Council, and our job is one of the best jobs in Auckland. We get to support, facilitate and enable radical innovation that realises the economic and social potential of South and West Auckland. He Waka Eke Noa, which is based in our Western Initiative team, connects buyers and clients to Māori and Pasifika owned businesses and promotes supply diversity and development across the country. But tonight, it's my real pleasure to introduce our guest, Teanau Tuiono, who is going to be sharing some of his insights and thoughts with us tonight about an incredibly timely topic. How might we reset the economy so that's better for people and the planet? Teanau has over 20 years experience as an activist, advocate and organiser at local, national and international levels on social justice and environmental issues. In Pasifika communities, he is known for his work in the education sector and climate change advocacy. And in Māori communities, he is known for his Indigenous rights activism. He has an interest in working at the intersection of Indigenous rights and environmental issues and has worked with remote Indigenous communities on the front line of climate change and biodiversity loss. Teanau is also a South Auckland boy. You were born and bred in Manurewa, I think?
Well, I was born in West Auckland and raised in South Auckland, so you know, the best of both worlds. Westie, born Westie, raised in Southie.
Yeah, absolutely perfect. So Teanau is appealing to both of our big place-based lenses, and is now living in Palmerston North. How I know Teanau is that we went to university together here in Tāmaki Makaurau, and then we were both in Wellington at the same time after university, and I think spent a lot of time on Courtney Place. And we also did those salsa classes. And really exciting news for Teanau. Not too long ago is that he was named as 5th on the Green Party list. So, with that said, Teanau, no mahara mai e hoa. And can you tell us a couple of interesting things about yourself that people don't know?
A few interesting things about myself. Well, I don't know. Well, I've worked in a couple of rainforests. I mean, a lot of people haven't done that. I've worked in Brazil, and I did so working to support intergenerational transmission of Indigenous knowledge between elders and their community. So that's random. A lot of people haven't done that. Probably pretty much worked on every single continent around on the planet as well. I was just kind of counting up the number of years I've been around this area. So when I was younger, I lived in the islands as a kid for a little bit. And then when we moved back from the islands, this was in the 80s, we ended up staying in Hamatangi and then Live-in. And now I've been in Palmerston North for probably around about 13 years as well. So I spent quite a bit of time between Horowhenua and the Manawatu as well. So yeah, raised in West Auckland, born in West Auckland, raised in South Auckland, somehow here in the Manawatu.
Yeah, and between all of that, taking it to the world. So yeah. Awesome. Thank you for coming on with us tonight. And I've got a few questions for you to get our discussion started. But it was only a week ago that the 2020 budget was announced. What were the highs in the budget for you, and what did you think was missing?
I really like the $1.1 billion green jobs thing for working for conservation. I think that's travelling in the right direction. There was a bit of pickup there for Māori initiatives as well. I think they got about $900 million. Some stuff for trade trainings as well, $1.6 billion in there as well. The schools lunch program was there as well. I think that's really, really important, particularly for those of us who know what it's like to miss a couple of meals. A bit of investment in housing. So like the travel, I guess, was heading in the right direction. I did want something that would, those are the good things. And you can look up all the good things on the old Google as well. But I think it could have been an opportunity to really reset the economy in the same way that Michael Joseph Savage did in the 1930s. But I get it. We're living in February. You're familiar with the WEA group, which is the Welfare Expert Advisory Group. When the pandemic first kicked in, there was a $25 bump up, but we know that won't be enough money. So I think one of the big gaps there is making sure that our safety nets are a lot more resilient as well. So I definitely think that was missing from this budget. And I think it's really about sort of setting the visions and setting the direction. So like for me, like the big thing is people on the planet, so and if you're thinking about people on the planet, you always have to think long term. And so I like kōrero that we have to prepare ourselves for 7 generations as well. And in order to do that, we have to make sure that we lay down the foundations, very strong foundations. And so I think when you look at those foundations, well, what are they? Well, we know in the pandemic crisis that we're in at the moment, that part of those strong foundations is safety nets. If you have a strong safety net, well, then that allows you to do a whole lot of other things. You only have to look to the States. The pandemic hit, they chucked $1 trillion into the financial markets, didn't use any of that money to buy like masks and ventilators and all that stuff to prop up their health system. They're in big trouble now. And so we can learn from their missteps, I think. And one of the things that I know is that there will be more economic shocks down the path. The climate crisis is on the way, so we've just had this big shock, right? And so the climate crisis will be even bigger. We're going to have an economic recession because of this as well. So we need to lay those foundations in a more mindful, strategic way. Yeah.
Thank you. One of the things that I've been really interested in is the Green New Deal movements around the world, and there's lots of different takes on that. So there's the Indigenous New Deal, the Red Deal, the People's Green New Deal. Lots of people seeing that there is an urgent need for a fundamental reset of the economy. And what I really love about the ideas and the language that's in different Green New Deals is the tethering of social and environmental justice together in ways that haven't been done before, and that it's setting out a really radical plan for rapid decarbonisation and a rapid lifting of economic justice and social justice as well. And the more radical versions of the Green New Deal tackle head-on issues like the commodification of arts and creativity, the low value attributed to the care economy, in the states, reparations for slavery, return of lands and sovereignty for Indigenous people, and even calling for things like the shutting down of the prison industrial complex, and all of these things being framed as a necessary part of a Green New Deal. And also that, you know, it calls for the benefits of green technology, green infrastructure must flow to the poorest communities first and foremost, otherwise it won't flow at all. So what would be your dream Green New Deal equivalent for Aotearoa? And if that was you as the Minister of Finance last Thursday giving the Budget 2020 speech, what would have you said?
Yeah, as I was saying earlier, I mean, I would lay it out based on a vision of ensuring that we put community and the environment first, because that's where I see the strength of the. I really like what you said about the Red New Deal and the Green New Deal and the People's Deal and all that kind of stuff, because if you've got that strong foundation, then
rural broadband, aroha mai.
Am I fading out, am I?
Yeah, it's okay. To me, it might be absolutely fine to everyone else there in Facebook land, but yeah. But no, keep going. It's a fact of life.
I think we're imagining me as the Minister of Finance.
The Honourable Teanau Tuiono, Minister of Finance.
Yeah, Minister of Finance. Yeah. Well, I mean, whenever you reshape something like the economy or reset the economy, you've got to do it based on a vision, and I reckon that vision has to be long term. And I like all that stuff you're talking about with the Red New Deal and the People's New Deal and the Green New Deal and all that kind of stuff. And you can build that on a strong foundation, right? So we know that when there is those strong foundations, people can be more entrepreneurial, if you like. They can be more creative because they don't have to worry about where the next meal is coming from or where they're going to sleep at night.
Yeah.
So, and these are the things that I think really hold us back. So my brother's been a teacher out in South Auckland on and off pretty much his whole entire teaching career. And one of the things he shared with me is that one of the... What's that?
Sorry, no, I was just going to say, is Tariki, he's in Clendon, eh?
He was in Clendon. He's done his PhD now.
Oh God, sorry, just catching up. Because I know we've got some Rewa Hard watchers tonight. So
really?
Yeah.
Well, I'm from the Rewa, guys. My mum's still in the Rewa. But, you know, one of the biggest barriers to education, you fix that and sort that, then a whole lot of other things, you know, start to make sense. So one of the other things that people talk about often is a UBI, Universal Basic Income. I'm not sure if that's come up at all. Yeah, so that's I think that's a really important conversation to have as well, because we've got this economic shock that we will experience, and we'll experience more intensely after we move, you know, in a couple of months' time, and then after that we'll have and those sorts of things. So we need to prepare for that. But also it really depends on how you organise it. You make basic services as well, essential services. No point giving everybody $50 if everything costs $80.
$100.
You're still going to have a shortfall.
Yeah.
So and you can do that by making sure that, you know, public transport is as affordable as possible, or ideally free. That our hospitals are properly resourced and so on and so forth, because, you know, we're throwing money around at the moment, and it should be, I think, going into things that are foundational in terms of where we want to see the country in 10, 20, 30, 40, whatever years.
Yeah. Thank you. And I love that you talked about creating conditions that enable people to be entrepreneurial, right? Because if you are just barely struggling to survive selling your labour day in, day out, there is no bandwidth to think about anything else. And to be you know, that pioneering, risk-taking, innovative entrepreneur, you've got to be able to have some kind of breaks in you know, stress and the cumulative effect of that. And because entrepreneurship and business is one of the things that we're really interested in. And the conversation and discourse on Māori economic development has tended to focus on primary industries and exports and hapu and iwi enterprise, particularly those who are post-settlement. And also there is an uncomfortable truth that a lot of investment, Māori investment and capital is tied up in producing commodities, that are high carbon emitters.
Yeah.
And then,
I'm not into that.
Yeah, it's an internal contradiction, right? It's hard to square, but it is one. It is one that we're going to have to take head on. But one of the things that we're really interested in, being here in Tāmaki, you know, we're not a lot of primary industry here. So, you know, is that the bulk of the Māori economy is actually small to medium-sized enterprises, and that's who we work with. And if we want an economy with Māori and Pasifika epistemologies and ways of knowing and doing, and our values being foregrounded in what a new economy could look like, what role, given, you know, your knowledge of Tāmaki in particular, and South and West Auckland, where we're focused, what role do you think those Māori and Pasifika SMEs and urban entrepreneurs can play in creating a different kind of economy?
I think, first of all, pay your employees a living wage. I think that's really, really important. I think it's also really important to have a vision which aligns with our values. So like in Māori, it's, you know, manaakitanga, aroha, and I reckon it's also looking after the whenua, all of that kind of stuff. And I think that's true of not only, you know, West Auckland. I guess what this kind of time and self-isolation has made me reflect on is that the need to slow things down. You know, sometimes fast is not best. Infinite economic growth with a finite amount of resources is not a good thing, and so we need to be more mindful about how we grow whatever we're doing. And so I would really always have that front of mind. So if you're organising something, you know, what do I want to achieve in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? Will this be good for my mokopuna? Will this be good for my tamariki? And I think that should be true whether you're working on a dairy farm, right down through to whether you're setting up business in West Auckland and South Auckland. This is actually what we've got to start thinking about. These are the things that we need to be incentivising and encouraging. A strong focus on families and environment, because I think those are the two things that help builds that foundation.
And yeah, right, because like whānau is like the first bastion and also the last bastion, right? So how can we conduct ourselves in an economy that really values whānau time, the unpaid labour of predominantly women, in raising whānau, looking after whānau, you know, kind of both ends of the generational spectrum and across. And I think there's something really special too in the way in which we conceive whānau as being not just kind of up and down generations, but actually across. Like I consider my almost immediate whānau to be like two kind of lots of cousins out, and then that's what I would consider to be whānau, and you know, my Pākeke, and then right down to our little muko. So what is it that we would need what is it that we would see in our day-to-day lives that would demonstrate that we are valuing whānau in the economy?
Well, here's an example. I mean, it is another rural example. I was talking with a manager guy who was like running a farm out there, and he'd been previously working at a Whānau farm, right? And then he'd moved to working with a Māori farm. I said, well, what's the difference? What's the difference? Are they both polluting and too many cows, all that kind of thing? And he says, well, what the difference is that the guy, the more commercial operation, well, the other operation up the road they were like, we want to make as much money as we can in 4 years or whatever it was. And the difference with this Māori organisation was like, I want to make sure that this is that this is going to be good for my mokopuna, so 80 years out, So they were thinking, well, I'm not even going to be here, but my children and my children's children are going to be here. What's the best way that we can run this operation to do that? And that's how I think we should be. And as I was just going, sort of reinforcing that I was saying earlier. I mean, you can do that if everything else is solid underneath you, because whether you're a worker, employer, or whatever, if your foundations are shaky, well, then things don't go well. But classic example, you take Air New Zealand, right? Was the economic impact of COVID-19? Well, no, because thousands of them are losing jobs.
Yeah.
Should they? So that makes me think, will they be prepared for climate change? Well, clearly not. So we've got to make sure that everything that we do is actually climate-proof, and also able to weather all these other economic shocks that are coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, because I think I've really loved how there's been lots of calls for a complete fundamental rethink about the economy. One that's better for the planet, better for people. You're seeing op-eds and stuff all the time. There's been a ton of webinars and all that kind of stuff. So what I think, but I think also, I mean, we heard this before, right? We heard this after the GFC, and yet we had a fossil fuel-led recovery. Nothing really changed. Certainly didn't get any fairer or more just. And we ended up bailing out financial services. What's it going to take to make sure that the same fine words that were used, not even a decade ago, we're not going to end up in the same place with all kind of mouth and no trousers?
We got to stop voting for people that put profit before people, and we've got to start supporting people that support community and the environment. I mean, it's that fundamental shift, and so like for example, I've worked up at the climate change negotiations, also at the biodiversity ones, and the climate change ones are, you get all the polluting industries there is a massive lobbying group to undo things, and so we've got to be quicker and more decisive and more organised to recognise that for what it is. They are organising for their short-term profits and interests. We, on the other hand, are organising for our communities, for our whānau, for our children and our children's children. And so we must be more quicker to understand what their role is, and even participating in these types of post-financial crisis.
And also one of the things that we've been wondering is, how do we actually democratise who gets to have a say what the new economy could and should look like? The way in which the economy is conceived, and then all the policy instruments that are, fiscal and otherwise, that are taxation, that are rolled out. Seems to me that one of the massive missed opportunities is that to bring people who are at the really pointy end of the economy and devolving some of that power so that they can have a greater say in things like, what's the purpose of the economy and for whom? Like those really fundamental
Yeah.
questions I don't think we've discussed as a nation.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognise that when we do devolve things, when we do devolve power, that we also devolve resources as well. You know what I mean? They're like, yes, we're going to give you your Teanau Rangatira, here's $5. Go do $50,000 worth of stuff. I mean, it just can't happen, you know. With when we really give power to like, in particular like hapu and iwi organisations that in a way that recognises you know, their Teanau Rangatira. I think that's, you know, that when you empower organisations, when you empower people, what is important that they are also empowered with resources, or else you get what you were saying just earlier. You know, things just don't happen. Yeah, so I'm really interested in wealth redistribution. The guy I've been following mainly over in the States is Bernie Sanders. He didn't get to be the nominee; they got the other guy. And so he's been really big on talking about like the 1% and making sure that we, you know, organise for the billions and not for the billionaires. And I remember a couple of years ago there was I think it was Oxfam. They did a study, and I think it was a couple of years ago where $1.3 billion. The two richest people in New Zealand, their combined wealth went up by $1.3 billion.
Yeah.
And the bottom 40% of us lost $1.3 billion worth. So it doesn't magician and to sort of, you know, realise where the $1.3 billion came from. And it's that's the kind of thing that we have to deal with. Yeah. We've got a climate crisis, a biodiversity crisis, and inequality crisis. So we've got to recognise it for what it is and sort it out.
Yeah. Do you think that enough people have got the message that catastrophic climate change, right, is going to make this pandemic and what we've been through look like a walk in the park?
No, I don't think people realise that, but that's what's coming down the track. Yeah. And how do we? I mean, like that's been like the big conversation that we need to be having more wider and more seriously as a community, but also as a country. You know, we can't keep doing the same old things. The reason why NGOs is falling over, or people losing their jobs, or these other things are losing their jobs and their livelihoods, because those businesses could not stand the economic impact of the COVID crisis. How are they going to stand up to the climate crisis? They won't be able to unless you build something strong underneath it. So safety nets, making sure you prioritise communities and the environment, all that kind of stuff. You build a house on solid foundations, the rest of it will take care of itself a lot better if you didn't.
Mm-hmm. And I wonder if and lots of people have written and spoken about this, about, you know, it's almost like and it kind of isn't like the slow burn of climate catastrophe. You know, so something will pop up in the news like the bushfires, and then it goes away and it's, you know, subsumed by another piece of news. And you know, I don't know how many people know whether or not, you know, that Tuvalu has lost 5 islands, have all gone under water, you know, and they have had no hand in creating this climate catastrophe yet. You know, it's our Tuakana and the Pacific Islands that are going to be at ground zero of this. So it's something that we've experienced in South Auckland, because, you know, South Auckland has been experiencing a slow burn economic disaster for decades, and we've got the largest concentration of the Māori and Pasifika diaspora, as does parts of West Auckland, and that's in a really incredible pool of talent for any city to have. Yet the inequity is becoming more entrenched. Like you pointed out, you know, like New Zealand thinks of itself as the country of, you know, fairly egalitarian, the country of a fair go, and yet, you know, income and wealth inequality is just stubbornly refusing to move. And every time there's an economic downturn, even a small one, all of that is laid bare. So what fundamental social, economic, cultural and political shifts are going to need to happen? so that we can address with urgency, once and for all, the causes that produce the effects of inequity and also of climate disaster.
I mean, there's those working groups that the government were pulling together, I think a couple of years back now, and one of them was the welfare expert advisory group. So if you Google that, and there are a whole lot of recommendations that came out of that. So when the crisis first hit, there was a $25 bump in the benefit, but we know that that's not enough. So I think a good first step, or a good step, or a good move forward would be to enable all the recommendations in the report, because it pulled together a whole wide experts who wanted to deal with, like this issue of inequality and poverty and all this kind of stuff. And $25 extra is not going to do it.
Yeah.
The other thing is around housing as well. I mean, that's another big issue as well. We did try to have a capital gains tax, went nowhere. But what would be better would be a progressive tax system. Like, the richer and richer you get, then you must contribute your fair share to the economy. I think that would go some way as well to sort of leveling the playing field. And I think, some of the stuff is just not that complicated. I think it's, you, like, for example, Jeff Bezos, the guy that owns Amazon, he either became or is becoming the world's first trillionaire. Can you believe it? So that country's in a complete crisis. Yeah, $1 trillion, like millions and millions of people going on unemployment, and this guy's a trillionaire making billions and billions of dollars off this crisis. We have to call it out for what it is. It's obscene and it's immoral, and we must recognize people that recognize and call out people that do that kind of thing, either in this country or in other countries as well, and we must tax them.
What's the big, if you had 3 wishes for around environmental sustainability, what would they be? Would they be renewable? Would it be renewable energy? Would it be more forestation and carbon capture and carbon sinks? What do you think would be the 3 big environmental things that we could do to protect and renew Te Kaiao?
Well, one of the good things about the budget announcement was the $1.1 billion environmental investment. So that's conservation jobs. That's good stuff. It's green jobs. It's supporting what's happening in the conservation area. I'm really into that kind of thing. But I think that all jobs could be green jobs. Not just the one that are pulling up weeds. There's we need to put a climate lens or environmental lens over everything. So, like, if you're looking at infrastructure, for example, infrastructure is one of the things that gets the economy moving. They did that during the Muldoon years, or tried to do it during the Muldoon years, and other countries do that as well. Start building stuff, and the economy starts rolling. Yeah. I think we can do that, but we can also be mindful about the environment as well, because there's other things like climate. We need to make sure that our infrastructure is able to adapt to the climate. So the infrastructure must deal with climate adaptation. So that's another way we could focus on making sure that all of our jobs become green jobs. I think is probably one of the things that I would like. And part of that is also around just transition. I'm not sure if we talked about just transition, like moving people from polluting industries and extractive industries to ones that are helpful for the environment and nature and stuff like that. I think doing work that they're proud of, work that they can feed their families, work that gives them dignity, but also make sure that it's good for their, provides for their children and for their children's children as well.
Yeah.
So probably jobs, just transition, all that renewable stuff as well. I think I'd really like as well. And I think at the forefront of all of this, certainly for me, is ensuring that all of this is consistent with Te Tiriti o Waitangi, making sure that that Māori communities and Pacific communities are at the forefront of our thinking in terms of how we organise these things. One thing, so I'm a Pacific Islander too, and I'm not being a Māori, I'm an Islander, and Pacific Islanders are on the front lines of climate change as well. And I believe that when Māori are doing well, the rest of the country is doing well as well.
And what one of the things that I've found really interesting and being able to tie the kind of social justice part of the economy to climate justice parts is that, you know, the care economy, the people who look after us when we're young, old, sick, or have a disability, that clean up after us and take away our rubbish, who feed us and make sure that we've got, you know, access to food and supermarkets, and that it's grown and picked and all the rest of it. Like that part of the economy is inherently, you know, caring is inherently low carbon.
Yeah.
So how do we bring, and the productivity of those jobs is for human dignity. So how might we, you know, kind of lift the status and value of caring and caretaking? And also, you know, arts and culture is inherently low carbon. How do we give that a massive shot in the arm so that everyone has access to creativity and opportunities to develop passions and things like that? So, you know,
Yeah.
I always think, you know, what's not the green tech, green job stuff, but also the other stuff that's inherently good for us and inherently good for the planet.
Yeah, and I totally agree with what you're saying. You know, like you know, health workers, nurses, doctors, teachers, those are all green jobs. They're all low emissions jobs, if not some of the greenest jobs in there. And also, I think, certainly for myself, the awareness that essential workers were always essential as well. Now, these are the people that actually got us through this, at least our 8 weeks of the lockdown as well. And so what's really important there is that we pay them properly. You know, I'm worried that businesses are taking this wage subsidy thing and not passing it down to their workers. I worry about that kind of thing. You know, because you have these people out there doing these jobs, and they're being supported by the government to continue their businesses operating. But is that flying down to the workers that are on the front line? I think it definitely. Whenever we invest in that way, the way that we measure whether we're doing that properly or not is whether that has had a positive impact, or whether there's for those workers on the front line. Yeah.
One of the things that at He Waka Noa that we've really enjoyed watching is the environmental innovations that's been coming out of the businesses that we're working with. You know, everything from deconstruction to reconditioning mattresses, just absolute strokes of brilliance that are the epitome of what the Green New Deal's getting at. And I was like really heartened by the school strike, ihumatao, like the activism part of it, and young people. So there's stuff going on and bubbling away, and how do we throw some fat on that fire to really kind of accelerate it, to really kind of get it going? You know, what might we kind of like do at scale that can, you know, enable us to leapfrog as Māori and Pasifika, enable us to leapfrog into leadership for a greener and more just economy?
Yeah, I think recognising those things first and foremost, because we know that there are always examples out there, but also recognising that you know, we shouldn't let these examples be isolated unto themselves. You know what I mean? So one person's doing one thing over there, or you know, an organisation's doing something over there, and they're isolated from themselves. We find a way to sort of bring that together so that it becomes an example as well, an example as to why we need this foundation. So these ways of organising and being and feeding ourselves and providing for our families and stuff like that become the norm as well. And so yeah, no, it's a big question. And yeah, thinking about the climate strike reflection as well, because in the Greens we've got a couple of the climate strikers that are standing as well. So we've got Luke Weejohn, Lourdes Whanua, who's from Cook Islands, such as myself, and Palmerston North, we've got Rohan Sharma as well. So a couple of them are in the mix there. It's good to have the youth involved. And I think it's really, because I'm a parent, I've got 4 kids as well, being really mindful that whatever we do now must have the future generation in mind. So it cannot be about the short-term profit. It's this, and of course we need some money to survive and so on and so forth, but those of us who have the power to move the big levers to ensure that the foundation is there so that people can be more expansive, if you like, or reflective of their thinking, then we should, use that privilege to do so.
So I'm going to ask you a bit of a provocative question. Should we completely blow up capitalism and return to things like mutual aid, other forms of exchange, or do we, not want to have our shoes produced and chosen for us by the state? If we went down the other road from free market capitalism to centrally planned capitalism, like what would be the alternatives to what we have now?
Well, the Greens are always getting in trouble for using the C word, Tanya. And you've brought it up again, capitalism. There was another C word. Marama Davidson, our co-leader, got in trouble for using another C word. But this C word, of course, is just as equally as provocative. I think we know that neoliberalism, this form of capitalism, neoliberalism, doesn't work. As soon as the crisis hit, neoliberal organisations, companies, and so on and so forth were the first ones to put their hands out, and because they're all about socialising the costs and privatising the profit. That doesn't work. I think we can roundly say that doesn't work. I think we need to deal with inequality. Live on a finite planet, and we can't have infinite economic growth on a finite planet as well. So I think it's really important to look at alternatives to capitalism, or look at ways to actually contain excesses of it. And so I've spent many of my years talking to different folks who have also been exploring that question as well. One of the people I have been reading up about, I'm not sure if you heard of her, Kate Woolworth. She does donut economics. So I don't know if it's an alternative to capitalism, but it's also about like, hey, we need to rein this in, right? You've got it. You've got that.
And hang on, just to show you how incredibly righteous I am. So 2 of my favourite women.
Naomi Klein. Oh yeah, I've met Naomi Klein years and years ago. There's a group of us had some beers with her in a pub in Wellington, her and her husband. Yeah, nice people. Yeah.
I love both of them. Yeah.
So I think those are definitely 2 people I have followed and continue to follow as well. And so what I do like about the donut economics thing is that there's some practical things in there. There's those planetary boundaries and so on and so forth. You can apply it to your community and to your city and possibly to your country as well. Will it deal to the excesses of capitalism? Probably. Is it the complete to capitalism? As we know, there have been other attempts at dealing with the question of capitalism. The USSR tried it, failed. China's run by a communist party who does capitalism better than all of us. Yeah, right. They're like
the poster child.
Yeah. They're better at it than everybody else. So I do like the ideas of mutual aid. Years ago, I was reading up about the guy who thought it up, or one of the guys that thought it up, Peter Kropotkin, the Russian guy. What I like about the idea of mutual aid is that it should be, in my interpretation of it, the focus is on collaboration. And a friend of mine was talking about how he would juxtapose, like theories on social Darwinism, where you hear this thing, and it's not necessarily about what Darwin thought. But it was an idea that people probably with an agenda extrapolated from as ideas that, you know, like it was about the survival of the fittest, and competition makes us to be better and stronger and more perfect. And if you compare that and contrast that to mutual aid, well, then actually it's not about survival of the individual and the fittest. It's about survival. Survival is based on those who can collaborate and cooperate better and move forward.
Yeah.
Well, I like that theory of evolution, if you want to call it that those who are able to cooperate and collaborate better are the people that move forward. And if we're going to do that, then we need to recognize that, you know, we're living on a planet with finite resources, and we need to organize ourselves accordingly, not to our own selfish individual interests, but also to our communities, but also our future generations as well.
Yeah. And what other benefits would a more equal society deliver? Like both you and I have been to Cuba, and one of the things that I really noticed, everyone was poor, right? And it was hard to get anything, oil, butter, you know, soap, shoes, all of that kind of stuff. But like incredibly high levels of what I perceived of strong social fabric, trust, and also, people, incredibly low levels of crime. Like I've never felt safer walking around in the middle of nowhere in the middle of the night than I did in Cuba and Havana. So there's something in there about inequality, and perhaps it's more inequality than it is poverty.
Yeah, probably Cuba, we're not sanctions there. Like you couldn't take aspirin into Cuba from America, for example, you get told off, you know, that kind of thing as well. So the amount of material goods that are around there at that particular time, I don't know what it is like now, there was, you know, very few. So you would see cars, like I saw a couple of Model T Fords. I saw 2 Model T Fords. One of them was going and one of them was being towed by a donkey. You know what I mean? But somehow these guys got these really classic old cars going because they had to.
Yeah.
You know, they had to. There was no other way that they could keep the things ticking over. And so, at that particular point in time, they put a lot of greenies to shame. They recycled everything.
Yeah. And make and repair. They were probably the circular economy before someone even thought of the word circular economy. Their organic gardening, lots of, and then of course, you know, the free healthcare for everyone and free education, the most literate population in the whole of, you know, Latin America. And
you can see their example through this pandemic. You know, Cuba's greatest export, as I understand it, is doctors. You contrast that with their neighbours to the north, who have poured trillions and trillions of dollars into, you know, weapons and missiles and that kind of thing, and not into their healthcare system. So you have this very contrasting picture of what these two different societies could deem valuable in terms of their investment. So I think that's interesting as well. Yeah.
And I do my bit for the Cuban economy by only drinking Havana Club, refusing to drink Bacardi. So yeah, I feel like I'm doing my bit. So we've got time for just one more question, and it's a bit of a left field one. So in addition to being a purveyor of dad jokes, you're also a sci-fi fan. What's
Yes, I am.
your favourite thing about sci-fi or about Afrofuturism that you know really gets you animated when you start talking about you know, The Expanse?
Oh yeah, and I love that. Let me tell you about The Expanse. I mean, what I really like about The Expanse is that there's a revolutionary proletariat in there. You know, like it's kind of this kind of underclass, the belters and stuff like that. So you've got that kind of dimension in there, and they're kind of organising and self-organising, and starting to set up their own communities. And you know, what would that look like in a not too far away into the future as well? So I like that. And then of course, you have the superpowers at play with like Mars and Earth and that kind of thing. So I like how it in some ways is a reflection of our own places as well. One of my favorite sci-fi authors, fantasy authors, was Ursula Le Guin. You probably heard of her. She wrote The Left-Handed Darkness, which is one of my favorite books, and The Dispossessed.
Oh,
and
right.
so check it out. She's got this. Those are my two favorite books. I've read them probably at least 20 times each. Like once a year or two, I'll read both of those books. And the Left-Handed Darkness is about exploring gender, and she wrote this so long ago that a lot of the I was reading one of her interviews about it, because feminism was really new and so she just kind of wrote this book, and so she's changed it up a little bit over time. But it was exploring gender issues, and The Dispossessed was about exploring a post-capitalist society, so anarchism on a faraway moon, and the impacts and the differences between the anarchist society and the capitalist society on the other place. So yeah. And then she's got another book called The Telling, which is about, if you peel it back, it's about the Cultural Revolution. Another one, which is The Wordful World is Forest, which is basically what the Avatar, that Avatar with the blue aliens?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she thought of it first. Ursula Le Guin thought of it first. Yeah. And here's another thing she also thought of as the first as well. A lost orphan, a lonely orphan goes to a wizard school. Yeah, Ursula Le Guin thought of that first. Yeah, but her orphan, her wizard was a brown kid, so quite different.
I think there's something really special about like sci-fi and Afrofuturism and fantasy and stuff, because it's so imagination heavy, and the ability to export yourself through time, space, different universes, all that kind of thing. Do you think that we need to be exposing our kids to more diverse kind of popular culture, cultural theory?
Yeah, I think so. My kids are at a kura kaupapa, so they're Māori-speaking children, and so so they know a lot of they'll know a lot of tikanga Māori stuff and Māori pūraka and stuff like that. A lot of mainstream kids don't know, and it's second nature for them because that's the world that they live in. But I'm always interested in sharing with them different Indigenous peoples' perspectives on different things, and making sure that they are connected to other communities outside our Māori-speaking community. Because I live pretty much in a Māori-speaking community, which revolves around our kura kaupapa as well. So finding different ways for them to understand the world. Well. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Taika is a really great example of what happens when we expose to stuff that probably you and I never had the opportunity to ever see or be part of, writing graphic novels and all of that kind of stuff.
He's the most famous model.
Yeah. Well, I think they only just got email when you and I were at university. Oh, sorry, you dropped out.
I dropped in and dropped out.
Yeah, dropped in and dropped out. Like this is technology for you. But sadly, we've come to the end of our kōrero, and I'd really like to convey a huge thank you to you, Teanau, for taking the time to share your thoughts with us, and also best of luck with the campaigning and the election in September.
Yeah, so I was just on there. I'm on the initial list. I was number 5, but then there's the final list.
Oh, so what does that mean?
Yeah, which goes to the voting members. It means I could go up or probably down.
Well, we'll be watching keenly to see if there's any movement. But best of luck. I think it's fantastic. I just love it when I see our people standing for those leadership positions, and it gives our kids something, more options about what they can do with your life. So that's really awesome. So thank you again from the rural wilds of Palmy, and we look forward to seeing probably, hopefully more of you in an elected representative sense.
Yeah, I'll get it. I've been in the pandemic, man. I'm gonna.
Right. You haven't had a COVID cut.
No, I haven't had a COVID cut, so I'm gonna be respectable and more electable the next time you see me, hopefully.
Well, kia ora, bro. Thank you very much for that. And to our viewers, next week, Anna Jane's going to be speaking with Laura Berry, who's the Chief Executive of Supply Nation in Australia. And Laura and the Supply Nation whānau have been amazing supporters of He Waka Eke Noa and have really been tuakana to us in terms of our work on supply diversity and Māori and Pasifika businesses. So to hear Laura, just tune in again at the same time, 7 o'clock next Thursday, the 28th of May. But until then, kia ora mai tātou, pō Māori e.
Pō Māori e.